Hello, welcome to the Creatives with AI podcast. I'm David Brown, founder of the solutions design agency FutureHand, and this is a show where we share insights about the future of artificial intelligence and how it will affect the lives of people working in the creative industry, particularly over the next several years. On today's episode, we chat with AI artist Zach Katz, where we touch on democratizing urban planning, using AI to create a compelling vision of the future, and living life in Amsterdam. Zach is the mastermind behind the Twitter account at Better Streets AI, where he uses generative AI imaging tools to transform cities into more pedestrian and cyclist-friendly spaces. With a passion for advocating for safe streets, Zach has led several successful campaigns in Portland, Oregon, revolutionizing the urban landscape. Currently living in Brooklyn, New York, Zach remains committed to merging technology and urban planning to build sustainable, accessible, and lively communities. If you want to find out more about the Creatives with AI podcast, you can always go to our website, www.creativeswith.ai, where you can find a variety of resources, including all our episodes, more information about our guests, and full show transcripts. While you're there, you can also sign up for updates, and you can contact us with questions or ideas for future guests and topics. Oh, and before we get started, I'd like to mention that if you like our content and you want to do something to help support us, please consider giving us a 5-star rating and writing a positive review. Positive ratings and reviews help us gain exposure to more listeners, and the more listeners we have, the more access to better and more amazing guests we can get. We're also looking for sponsors to help us fund future episodes and to reach a wider audience. So again, if that's something that you can help us with, please reach out via the website. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy this conversation with Zach. Hi, Zach. Welcome to the podcast. I know you have a burning question to get started with, so maybe you can kick us off.
How do you guys know each other? What's the story behind the podcast?
How long have we known each other? 5 years?
5 years?
5 years? Yeah.
6 years?
In various guises. Yeah. So I work in local government, and I do a lot of health and social care projects with the use of technology, which is kind of brave in local government because everything moves really slowly. Our health system is different from the States. It's not very innovation driven because it's a national model. So I pilot new approaches using data and technology to improve social care and health for people in the area I live in. And so I work with a lot of startups, and you know, I've got a really good network in Oxford, and I've done several projects with David, you know, in various guises and different companies that he's been working in, and now we work together in the same team. So kind of came full circle, and we're, you know, and AI obviously is a big factor in just about everything that we're doing in innovation right now across local government, across national government. And so we're fascinated, and we wanted to get together and talk to people about it when it's in its infancy, because it feels like we're in the Wild West at the moment. I don't know what you think, but
yeah, like talking to people who own cars in the 1920s.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, you know, Dee Dee comes from sort of she's been in public sector a lot longer than I have, and she comes from the kind of health side. I come more from the data side. So I moved to the UK in 99, and very shortly after started working for data analytics companies, looking at things like marketing data, web analytics data, that sort of stuff. So looking a lot at the digital marketing and web side of things. And then all the sort of associated data that goes with that, demographics and all the other stuff, and trying to figure out how to make websites better and advertising better and all that. But in the last, I'd say 7 years, I guess, I've worked a lot more on the smart city side. So I started working for a big data company that focused a lot. They had a really specialist tool that could deal with like petabyte size databases, and it was really, really fast, which was excellent for things like transport data around like train networks and stuff. And so I picked up a lot of public sector customers. And so that kind of turned into my niche, which is how I met Dee Dee and the team that I work with now as well. So what was interesting in particular for me about the stuff that you're doing, because obviously I saw you on Twitter and some of the AI stuff that you post on your Twitter feed. And that was really what made me want to reach out, because it kind of touches on a couple different things in my background. I mean, obviously it's the use of AI and trying to help, people reimagine cities, I guess. And I'm going to let you sort of express it in your own words in a minute. But it was that, and then the transport side, which I found quite interesting. So maybe for the people listening, if you just give sort of a couple of minutes on what your background is and kind of, what your tool does, and then we can maybe kind of go from there and work in the AI aspect.
Well, I started a Twitter account last summer where I used generative AI to visualize more walkable, bikeable cities and show before and after images of what these streets could look like if they were transformed to be more people-oriented, people-friendly.
And how did you get that idea? Where did the idea come from?
Well, I've kind of been like, I was like radicalized into the urbanism world or whatever a couple years ago. Like I, growing up in the suburbs and then going to school in the city. And then I moved to Portland, Oregon, and got really into like just biking everywhere. And later I led some advocacy campaigns for like protected bike lanes and car-free streets in Portland. And then after that, I moved to Amsterdam, where I lived for a year, just to like experience what a sort of like, ideal urban design is like, and just to kind of, it was just, just for fun, really.
Yeah.
But
what part of Amsterdam were you in?
I was in West,
right,
by like Rembrandt Park. Do you know?
Yeah.
Amsterdam pretty well?
I know it a little bit. I worked for a Dutch company for 3.5 years, so I used to travel to Amsterdam once a month. But they were more out by the Ajax Stadium, sort of the new stadium. So I stayed most of my time. I mean, the first few times I went, just because it was fun and different, I tried to stay in town. And then after that, it just became, it was sort of normal, and I just wanted to be away from the tourists. So
yeah, I didn't spend any time.
I ended up staying further out.
I didn't spend any time in the city center. Like it's like Midtown in New York. It's like there's no reason to go there really if you live there. Like, but all that it's actually a shame that when people visit, they tend to stay within the canal ring, because some of the most pleasant parts of the city are right outside in like West and Oost and De Pijp and stuff.
Yep. And how'd you end up in New York?
I had moved to New York like off and on every couple, like just I was living in Boston, and then I moved to Portland, and then New York, and then back to Portland, and then Amsterdam, and then back to like I was sort of all over. But when I left Amsterdam, I really missed New York, so it was like it kind of feels like home to me.
Yeah. It never leaves you. Like I said, I used to live there. It's been like 35 years, and I still I still feel like part of my soul. In part of my soul, I'm a New Yorker, and always will be.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
So when you started using it, then which particular platform do you use? Obviously, we're not sponsored by anyone, and we don't support any particular platform doing any particular thing. I'm just curious which tool you use to create the images.
Yeah, mostly DALL-E too.
Right.
Been recently experimenting with Midjourney a little bit, but they don't offer any in-painting right now, so it's impossible to do like before and after. So yeah, mostly DALL-E. Right.
And what's your experience been like, kind of, because you've been using it for several months, and obviously, I think the release of ChatGPT and it sort of coming out in the last few months has sort of captured people's imagination. But obviously, there were tools out that were, that have been out longer than that, and there have been some specialist tools, in particular, that have been out longer than that. And what are your sort of thoughts on, from someone who's been using it a little bit longer, maybe than other people have, and where do you think that it's going? Particularly DALL-E, I guess, since you've been using that one the most. What are your thoughts on that and the sort of the generative AI and around the imagery and stuff? I'm curious to know from someone who's been sort of using it hands on.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's going to democratize urban planning in the same way that Instagram democratized photography. Like, there's nothing really that special about what urban planners do, no offense. It's like you just sort of like come up with an idea for how the street or the city or the area could be better, and then you solicit public feedback. But everyone has I should say rather, like desires for how, like, fundamental, like basic things. Like, I want to be able to like safely bike to the grocery store, like, and it doesn't take you don't need like AI like empowers like people to see what that would look like and to therefore more easily support it or like express their support for it. And like that's kind of been the major barrier to like making stuff happen, as far as I can tell in the urban planning world. Like, so by letting anyone do that, you don't need to have the power to visualize stuff like centralized within the city planning department or whatever.
And I'm curious, what's the appetite like in the United States around active travel? So around biking, walking, public transport, because it's a hot topic in the UK. You know, it's like some people love it or hate it. It's like Marmite, you know. So I'm curious, like in a city like New York, like how can a city like New York function without cars? Because that's kind of the future, isn't it?
Well, it already kind of does function without cars. I mean, in a sense, like, because most neighborhoods, the majority of people don't own a car or use a car on a regular basis. Like even outer neighborhoods where like 20% of people own a car, the people who actually use that car on a regular basis for everyday trips is like 5%.
Yeah.
So it's really like New York does not need cars to function.
I count taxis though. I count the yellow cabs as cars because like obviously like I lived in New York. Who drives in New York? Nobody. But like getting rid of taxis as so when I think of like carless, I think of active travel. So people walking, biking, or using public transport.
Sure. I mean, I think taxis always will have a good place to like a good reason to exist. But the amount of space they need is just one lane for any given like. Yeah, it's not like you could get rid of all the single occupancy cars and trucks and stuff, and taxis would be much more efficient in getting around.
So I get that. I used to live in Chicago as well, and Chicago's the same. I think there are a few northern metropolitan cities in the US where that's probably the case. You go somewhere like Dallas, though. I mean, Dallas is a massive city, but there's not really great. I think they have sort of an overground trolley or tram system, but it's not like a full transport system. So you still have to drive. But it's those sort of older cities: Boston, New York, Chicago, Seattle to a certain extent. I think from what I remember, I don't know what public transport's like in Portland.
Portland has pretty nice public transport for what it is, being a fairly small city. It's got a streetcar, a really nice bus system. Some lines are 24 hours, like a light rail. But honestly, I think that public transit will probably continue to be like incrementally improved in the U.S. for the most part, with the exception of some cities like L.A. that are like building a little bit faster than the average U.S. city. But yeah, I think by and large, like e-bikes will be the revolutionary thing for U.S. cities. Like, there's no city in the country where you couldn't get across basically the entire city in like, I don't know, 20 minutes to an hour on an e-bike. So it's just, and then
See, I haven't been to New York in so long. I wouldn't know what it's like now. I think the last time I was there was about 25 years ago.
Oh wow, it would be a trip to revisit.
Yeah,
be a real trip.
I bet it would. I'm curious so going back to the city planning idea, I think one of the things that I think is going to be potentially, trying to think of the right word, I think it's going to be really good for people, because I think what we're going to find is that as AI becomes a little bit more sophisticated, I think that there will be tools that will come out that will enable citizens to actually look, and they can say, okay, well, we might want a low traffic neighborhood, or we might want to change our street to a 20 mile an hour speed limit, or, we don't like all the traffic going through, so we want to try and do that. Or we want to try and, maybe if we add an extra lane to this road, because we think the traffic is too bad. Like, normal citizens will have the ability to sort of put that stuff into a tool that will actually go and do the modeling of what the impact of that is. And at the minute, those modeling tools are hugely expensive. They're locked behind, very expensive paywalls, and you need to have a degree in statistics basically to be able to use them. So even if you say, well, this road is really congested every day. We think that if you added another lane, or 2 lanes to the road, that would really help the traffic. But we all know that doesn't work in the long term, right? If you just make the road bigger, that just means more cars go on it. And so you end up in the same situation with twice as many cars.
Yeah, the whole field of modeling is bullshit.
Interesting.
Like it's
I'm not sure I'd go
elaborate,
that far,
elaborate, Zach.
Well,
elaborate.
yeah, I mean, it's
yeah,
like,
what do you mean? Yeah.
you can only like predict human behavior to a certain extent. And like, it's not, I don't know, maybe bullshit is a strong term, but it's more like you want to design the street to influence people to behave the way you want them to, rather than based on any sort of what the model is telling you. So if you want to, encourage people to bike and to drive less, it doesn't matter what, like the model doesn't matter. Like you build the best practice infrastructure that is proven to get people biking and get them out of their cars. And then that achieves whatever the model you were hoping the model would tell you.
I agree to a certain extent. I think you do, though, need to use the models to understand what the knock-on effect of making that change is. And a good example is here in the UK, a lot of cities have put in these low traffic neighborhoods. And essentially what happened, as far as I can tell, and I'm sure someone will call me out on this, and that's totally fine, is that kind of with the invention of Waze, like people used to drive and they kind of, they went on the main roads and they went everywhere and we had congestion, but everybody kind of stuck to the roads, that the main roads where they were supposed to. And then Waze came out and Waze started saying, oh, well, instead of waiting in that traffic, you can just shoot down this neighborhood street. And those streets were never designed for the volume of cars that are now going down those roads. They weren't designed for safety. They weren't designed, like they don't have the infrastructure to deal with that much traffic. So what's happened is that now those roads have become blocked up. So someone who lives on that street now can't get in and out of their driveway. They can't actually get their kids to school. And, their kids used to be able to walk safely, but now they can't because there's delivery vans going up and down that all the time, all hours of the day. And so what the pushback against those sort of tools, so this is a pushback against the tech a little bit to say, okay, well, it's really well and good that you're trying to make this easier for drivers, but people actually live here. And so the people living there have said, well, we don't want this. So they've started putting up sort of bollards and sort of planters and things at the end of the road. So actually that road's now blocked off. So traffic can't go down that way, but the people who live there can still get in and out and they can cycle and whatever.
Interesting. And those people probably would have been against diversion if they hadn't seen the negative consequences of more through traffic in the first place.
Well, what's interesting is that a lot of them are still against it.
Even though they're implementing it themselves?
Not the people that live on the streets, though. The people that live on the streets in the low traffic neighborhoods love it. And why wouldn't they? But it's the rest of the residents that...
Oh, the people who want a rat run.
Well, it's not just the people that want a rat run. I'll tell you, what's interesting is I'm neither for nor against. Like, I mean, I use public transport to get into work. So it's like, I've never driven my car into work, and I have a car, and I use it for stuff that I can't get on public transport for. But I definitely wouldn't drive to work because it's way too expensive to park down there. I have really good bus access. So what I've noted is an unintended consequence is like, because humans, you can't predict what humans are going to do. You just can't. It's what you were saying at the beginning, Zach, where people are kind of sitting on the bus. You can end up what used to be a 30-minute journey can now sometimes be an hour and a half on public transport because it's just gridlock traffic, right? And it's like
no
people,
bus lane.
There is no bus lane, and it's like so. But what's happened is plenty of people, and it's anecdotal, but it's people that I talk to think, you know what? If I'm going to sit on the bus for an hour and a half, I'd rather sit in my car. And so you've got I don't know what the percentage is, but you've got a lot of people that are hopping in their car that wouldn't have used their car before.
Exactly. It's all just decisions based on what makes the most sense.
Yeah.
For the person, and that's the problem, is that the city is not incentivizing people to bike or to ride the bus. Like if the bus was in its own lane and it was faster than driving, then people would take the bus.
Yeah. Definitely.
And if it was safe to bike, they would bike.
We have a situation like that in where I live, and there is a bus lane, but the problem is it's almost actually worse because the bus has to eventually merge into traffic. So where the buses have to merge, that actually creates more of a backup.
Yeah, well,
than if they didn't have to.
Right. I mean, that's a bad designed bus lane. Like the only way it works is if the entire trip is not stuck in traffic. Like you can't have that sort of bottleneck.
Yeah. But I think in newer cities, you can do that. In older cities, I mean, here we're working with cities that are older than the US by several hundred years. And you don't have the ability to just tear down houses because they're in the way. It's not like it is in America. They'll just tear down the houses. They don't care.
Sure.
Because none of the houses are that old anyway, and nobody really cares. But here, and in a lot of cities, like in New York as well, right? You've got old established neighborhoods. The houses are very close. You might have a single, maybe a double lane road. If people start parking on it, there's like one lane of traffic that can go down. You've got sort of, sidewalks on the sides, and like, there's nothing you can do with that. You can't put a bus lane in there because if you tried to do something like that, you'd have to tear the houses down, and that's
you could absolutely. There's plenty of space, and if you redesignate a street from a car street to a bus street, then suddenly you not only have space in the middle of the street for the bus, but you can either build wider sidewalks where the parking exists currently, or you can put in protected bike lanes on both sides.
I love this. This has turned into a transport conversation.
I'm going to bring it back to. I'm bringing it back to AI, guys. Listen to me, my brothers. So, I love it. I love the active travel. But so AI, I've got a question for you. So, if we're going to keep to all being champions of active travel, how can AI or the use of AI tools facilitate and promote that? And it's a two-part question, Zach. The second part is. Because I'm always like the voice of doom. I'm not the voice of doom. Like, I love AI. I think technology is amazing, but I'm also a little scared at how fast things are going. So I'm curious to know as well what your thoughts are on job displacement and what that looks like. Maybe in this particular kind of subject area. So if we're talking about planners, like, what's the future for people in urban planning? Is AI going to displace them? Is it going to partially displace them? Is it going to be a hybrid model? What do you think?
Yeah, that's a great question. Let me answer the easier question first, which is your question about like visualize, like how AI can help people visualize better streets, basically. Yeah. And that's actually very, very much pertinent to what we were just discussing. Like one of the things that really heavily influenced and continues to influence the way I like make these images is my time in Amsterdam and seeing firsthand what a really good street design looks like and what can truly be done if the political will exists to make like dramatic radical transformation. Like if they like there was a street in Van Woestraat or Van Valstraat or whatever in Amsterdam where it's like it looks like any street in New York or in any city. It's like 2 lanes of traffic, 2 parked cars, lanes of parked cars on either side, and a girl was like killed riding her bike, like a 12-year-old girl. And cities in the US would do absolutely nothing, maybe a vigil, and that's it. But they banned cars from the street, so it's going to be car free in like 2 years. With these images, I just wanted to show people like what would not just like the like milquetoast like incrementalist next step of the street look like, squeezing in a little protected bike lane, but like what's like the platonic ideal of this street? What would it look like if you really did the best thing possible for the street? And it was in this like carbon neutral city where cars are like not required and not catered to on every single block. Yeah, I think that sort of that's the benefit of the images is just like this aspirational, like what could it really look like if you really did a good job and it ignored all political considerations for a second. But yeah, and I guess that sort of ties into the question of like what will urban planners role be, because right now urban planners are very much beholden to political desires, right? Like that's a huge barrier to doing what a lot of them probably really want to do. And So if they can use tools like this, or if the public has access to tools like this to see, what their streets could look like, what their cities could look like, and if the elected officials can see that as well, I think it'll really make radical change a lot easier. And I don't know, like it's really hard to say whether their jobs will just become, like photographers now, where it's like, I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think it's going to end us all.
It's a good question.
What do I think about AI? I think AI across the board. I think there's no part of life it's not going to touch, and what I think is really wild right now is that, whenever I thought about the future of automation or artificial intelligence and machine learning, or, just automation, I really thought it was going to replace low-level jobs, like I didn't think it was coming for the smart people this fast. And it's quite scary. It's thrilling and scary at the same time, because it's hard to imagine the change that we're going to go through as a society as the result of using these tools that are evolving so quickly at the speed of light. And so I don't think anybody can say with any certainty what jobs are going to look like, what jobs are going to fall away, what are going to become hybrid, who's going to be, and who's going to be kind of the king of the castle, because you just can't know with this, can you? So I don't say AI is bad.
Although
I don't say it's good. I say it's like, I'm also old enough that I, listen, I had a childhood with no internet, no phones, so, and I think this is bigger, and so it's with some trepidation, which I think is a healthy thing, but it's with excitement at the same time. But yeah, I think it's going to take out a lot of jobs.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Actually, I think it's reasonable to just make the most, like, just as a thought experiment, just to make the most bold assumption or prediction, rather. You could say maybe like every city will have like just one person in charge of urban planning, and they're basically just the person in charge of using or managing the AI, but the AI is coming up with the entire transportation plan and the street cross sections, and there's even like AI robots like building the streets.
Yeah, I'm with you, brother. I'm with you. That's what I see.
Yeah.
I mean, not like, not next week, but I don't think we're talking about, like, I think that the evolution of this will be because it is already so fast, right? That I don't think it's going to be like, like dial-up internet, like where we were then compared to now. I think it's just going to be much, much faster than that. And I don't think I don't think what you've just described is an unrealistic prediction at all. So I just wonder what we're all going to do. Yeah. That's my thing. What are we going to do?
Well, I can give you an example of one way that AI is already being used here in the UK. So there's a company that builds an AI tool, or has built a custom AI tool that essentially plans maintenance works. But what it does specifically is it can predict when the road crews are able to go out to start work on the road. And their prediction is they can predict several hours ahead with plus 95% accuracy to what the traffic level is going to be on any section of road, by observing what the current traffic is now. So they take real-time data and they say, okay, at 7:00 tonight, this is what the traffic volume is going to be like. Because the roadworks can't start until the traffic is below a certain level. And what happens at the minute is the road crews will go out and it'll be too busy. So they'll just end up sitting in a truck on the side of the road for maybe 2 or 3 hours sometimes while they're waiting for the traffic to go down. And so they're just wasting time. They're just sitting there doing nothing. Or conversely, they could have gone out 2 or 3 hours earlier, but they only went out because they're like, well, traffic doesn't die down till about 9:00, so we won't go any earlier. But actually on this day, they could have gone at 6. And that might mean that they could actually do all of the work that they need to do in one night instead of having to come back another night.
Yeah, it's like DoorDash automated scheduling kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And but it uses real-time data to predict and say, okay, later tonight, those guys can go out at 6:00. They can start work early, which means they only have to disrupt traffic for one night. And it means that it's a lot cheaper because you don't have to pay the road crew twice. and it's less disruption for the people on the road. And that's saving tens of millions of pounds of cost every year already. And so I think that's where it starts. But the thing is that it doesn't take a great deal of imagination, because the way it works at the minute is that's just a tool that the planning team uses to then figure out whether the road crews can go. It doesn't take a lot of imagination to think, well, 3 years from now, there won't be a person running that planning because they won't need to. The AI will do all of it. So it can message the road crews, it can interact with all of the teams, it can do all of the stuff that that person used to do. And I think this is, Didi and I feel very similarly about this. I think that's where we're concerned, is it's like, what happens to all those people that were doing those types of jobs? And this can be across everything. It'll be across rail, it'll be across airlines, airports.
Where did the people
everything.
who were like shoe shiners and like hat smiths or hat makers and horseless carriage or horse-drawn carriage operators, what did they all end up doing?
Well, they ended up doing other stuff,
Well-
but I'll tell you something. That change was a lot more gradual. This change is going to be so rapid that it's like it can't not displace people. So it's like hat maker is a good example. I've got a fashion background, so I can tell you that there are still hat makers in the world today. So it wasn't like everybody stopped buying hats. It was like a real gradual decline. Where this is, when this gains speed, and we're seeing it starting to gain speed, it's just going to go like this. So it's going to be like, there's just going to be no hats, Zach. Like fast.
I guess. I guess all you can do is like just buy a bunch of rice and beans.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
Stock up.
Pasta.
I think, yeah, and I think just to continue on that, and this is something that Didi said before, is, the difference is I think during the Industrial Revolution and that sort of thing. So when that came in, a lot of the hat makers and stuff and the horse and carriage drivers, they just became car drivers, or they went into jobs where maybe they went into more of a white collar kind of job. With the Industrial Revolution, people moved off the factory floor. The machines meant that there were more managers. There were more people managing the process. So they went into desk jobs and office jobs and stuff like that. And I think every single revolution that we've had so far has been around those physical labor jobs. So even the introduction of robotics and all that sort of stuff into the manufacturing process of automobiles, like a lot of those factory workers don't work anymore. No one talks about them because it's not a popular topic to talk about politically. The guys who used to work in the oil fields and all that sort of stuff, now that sort of green energy is coming in and oil's not done anymore, there's huge plans to try and retrain those people, but they're out of work at the minute. They literally aren't working because they don't have the skills to do anything else. But eventually over time, like Didi said, over a long period of time, new people who would have gone into those jobs who used to be miners, for example, like the miners' kids would have just been miners. But because those jobs didn't exist, then maybe they went to school and maybe they then became a knowledge worker. So they were doing like what we call a white collar job. The problem with this is that this is coming for the white collar jobs and there's nowhere to go. And I think that's what's different about this situation than we've seen in the past. And so there isn't, at least we don't see it yet, but there's no escalation of what's that next step that everybody can go to. And it may be eventually in 100 years, it might look different, but it's going to be a rough 100 years in between, I think.
Yeah. No, yeah, for sure. I mean, I see what you mean, like mass unemployment and ideally
to leave everybody feeling really positive.
No, but it's like, but you've got to talk about this stuff because it's like, it is the deepest, darkest fears of everybody. And there's no question that AI will make people's lives immeasurably better in aspects, but it's like,
Better.
There's like, and the thing is, like, the genie's out of the bottle now. So it doesn't matter whether, it doesn't matter whether we think it's good or whether we think it's bad or whether there's going to be positives and negatives. It just, it's not the AI that I don't trust, it's the humans. It's the humans, because how are we going to and how is the fabric of our society going to change, So that doesn't mean to say that I think we should shove the genie back in the bottle because you can't do that. But it's just like with the internet. We could not have imagined where the internet was going to go and what the bad aspects of the internet have been, because there have been many, right? So, which doesn't mean to say that I think that we shouldn't have it, but it's like, I think that the speed at which we're going, we do need to pause and reflect and think about what's next, because there's going to be a lot of unintended consequences.
Yeah, for sure. Zach, so what cities have you done up until now? And then what cities can we look forward to coming in the future?
I think I've done most major cities.
Have you done
and a lot of
Toronto?
small towns.
Have you done Toronto, Zach?
Yeah. The Gardiner Expressway, replaced that with the light rail and a park. Yeah, King and Queen Street. Done most U.S. North American cities and a lot of cities in Europe.
Some of the European ones might be more difficult. Like, I always go to Barcelona. When I think of a really good sort of street design, Barcelona is amazing. They've done a really, really good job. They've got a lot of really wide areas, but they have, areas off to the side. There's loads of sort of active travel, people cycle, everything. There's plenty of room for everybody to sort of get along. And, and they have a lot of sort of trees. So they've kept as many trees as possible. So you've got a lot of, in the summertime, there's a lot of shade. It's one of my sort of favorite cities to go, even from a transport perspective. You got to do Oxford now, though. You have to pick a couple of streets in Oxford, and you have to do something.
Sure, yeah.
Sure. Brilliant. Is there anything else, Zach, that you might want to promote? Tell everybody what your Twitter handle is so that they can go and see some of the images and follow you over there.
Yeah, it's twitter.com/betterstreetsai.
Okay, excellent. Well, I think that's winding up the time. So thank you very much.
I feel like we were just about to hit upon some crucial insight.
Deep, dark.
Well, we could keep going if you want.
Yeah.
No, I'm just messing around. No, it is. It's very hard to predict this stuff. So we might all be out of jobs, Zach. But what will we do with our free time? That could be the thing, Yeah, it's a huge opportunity to do what you love to do. Assuming that you can also, you get your basic income check, your UBI check. UBI is so
well, here's a controversial statement. I think eventually we're going to get to the point that there isn't going to be any money at all because there isn't going to be a need for it.
Oh yeah, post money.
But like no money, not even digital
just
money.
Like 3D printing,
no money. Yeah, there won't be any money.
You're just
because
3D
it'll be
printing
pointless.
Stuff. But what would a world without money look like?
How do you get food?
Like how are you going to eat?
Yeah, what's like the process? What's the process of getting food in like a post money world?
You can still get food, but nobody has to pay for anything. You don't pay for the transport of it. You don't pay for the seeds of it. You don't, like, if nobody pays for anything, then you could literally do everything that we do at the minute if there was no money, because everybody could just keep doing it. But you'd have no stress over paying for anything. If no person at any point during the process charged anything for anything, then you could continue to do everything as we do it.
But would people still do stuff?
If machines are doing everything.
Would people still do stuff though? Like stuff.
But I think they would. Yeah. But if you follow the logic of what we've been talking about, if you remove sort of 80% of the stuff that people do anyway, there's going to be a whole lot of people that need to do stuff. And so, farming and stuff like that. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, there's an incentive there, but farmers don't make any money at the minute. So literally they make no money. So why do they do it?
Because it's what they do.
I think if their life was actually easier, they would do it because they enjoy growing stuff and they want to feed people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Maybe I told you it's slightly controversial, but
no money. When do you think there's going to be no money? Like when? Call it.
No idea.
Like, no, really. When do you think there'll be no money?
100 years.
I'll be alive in 100 years. What do I care if there's no money in 100 years? I'm checking out.
We're not going to see it. Our kids might see it. Our kids might see it.
Mm.
I've got 29-year-old daughters and I have a 15-year-old son, and I reckon my son would have potential of seeing it.
No money.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought.
But if everybody's out of work, you talk about UBI, well, UBI, you can't fund UBI if there's no tax money coming in from people not working. So where does the money for the UBI come from? Well, you can't. You just get in this situation where you're now just making up money for the hell of it.
Yeah,
which is kind of what money already is.
You may as well just not have any.
Yeah, that is what money already is, Zach. That's right. There is no money anyway.
Exactly.
It's not real.
I know, but do you know what I mean though? But if it's always like we all look at it and we all say, well, all the governments owe each other, which is the most ridiculous thing in the world. Spain owes Germany and Germany owes Spain. So the first thing you've got to do is just cancel out both of that debt either way. And then you go, okay, what are we left with? And you've probably canceled out 10 billion, sort of euros or whatever that those countries owe. And if you start doing that with all the countries that owe each other, then you get to a point where actually the debt's probably manageable, first of all. And second of all, it's like, again, because it's all just numbers on a spreadsheet. It doesn't actually exist. None of this money actually exists. And there's more debt in the world than there's physical money to pay for it anyway. So it's all pointless. So that's what I mean though, is at some point, I think everybody, we're all just going to look around and go, what's the point of this? Like, why are we getting a basic income that comes in? Why don't we just stop having to pay for stuff that would be a lot better? And
so, but why have you picked 100 years? I'm curious because if this is
because you made me pick a day.
But look, if this is happening so fast, right? Why 100 years? Why not 10 years?
There's certainly not an appetite enough in the people that are alive now to do something like that. I think the people that are alive now still are so entrenched in the concept of money and everything else. I think it'll take a couple of generations to actually get to that point.
Yeah, but it could be just one generation.
Yeah, I think it might take two. But to get to the point where literally they're just going to look around and they're just going to go, well, what's the point of this? It's just like, everybody now is like, what's the point of going to work? Like, why do I go to an office? And 10 years ago, no one would have ever thought that. They'd be like, no, you go to work. You've got to go to work. You've got to go to an office. Now no one goes to an office. Like, you can't even get people to come in, even if you want them to.
People are surprisingly flexible.
Yeah. But that was COVID. COVID did that. So what's going to be the crisis that'll make money disappear? Because I don't think that. Yeah, but because I don't think it's just as simple as people will, kind of in a couple of generations realize what's the point in this. You have a lot more faith in humanity than me, David. I think that people do not change their behavior, because of thinking what's the point. It's like it takes a crisis to make people change, Like COVID was awful, but COVID was amazing for technology and healthcare and amazing for remote working. Yeah. And literally light speed transformation of things that culturally people would not do in healthcare or in social care. So it takes some kind of big crisis to crash money. It does. I don't think it'll be like, it's not a really good idea.
It will.
I don't know.
But at the minute, we can sort of support a certain number of people through, whether it's unemployment payments or, social programs or whatever. But if we go down the track that we think we're going to go down, and in 10 years or 15 years, you're going to have 60% of the creative or 70% of the creative industry isn't going to be working because there aren't any jobs for them. That's a whole different kettle of fish. If you need to pay for, a few people, that's one thing because everybody else is working. When no one's working, there's no money coming in and there's no money to pay for it. So at that point,
do you know what happens?
There isn't money.
You know what happens at that point?
Well, yeah.
Viva la revolution.
Yeah. Sorry?
Viva la revolution. That's what happens at that point.
Exactly. Yeah, but there's still no money even after the okay, fine. You get a big revolution and maybe 50% of people kill each other. Okay, so you've got fewer people to pay for, but still, I just don't, in my own mind, and maybe, my logic is totally off, and that's fine. I've been wrong about loads of stuff, but it's almost like the thought experiment. For me, that's where that ultimately goes, because we're going to get to a point in society where most of the jobs are gone. And in a situation where most of the knowledge jobs are gone, which, okay, you still need at the minute, and for the foreseeable future, stuff like robotics isn't going to be able to replace an electrician or a plumber or somebody who needs to work with their hands. Like, robots can't even fold a sheet.
No,
They literally can't fold a
you're
sheet.
wrong.
And they won't be able to fold a sheet for probably 10 years.
No.
So
Sooner.
maybe, but that's sort of the litmus test. It's a very complicated thing. So doing things like those types of jobs will still be around. So kids coming, I'm telling my son, I'm like, look, if I were you, I would train as an electrician, because that's the only kind of job that's really going to have any job security moving forward. And people, we're still, as a society, I think a lot of people still kind of look down on the trades. There's this whole concept that you need to go to university and then you need to make lots of money and you want to work in an office because it's not a hard job and that sort of thing. Whereas the people I know who are electricians are making 6-figure income. They've literally got more business than they know what to do with. They could work 80 hours a week every week if they wanted to, because no one wants to do those jobs. So, now might be the time to get into those areas. And, maybe now's not the best time to be a data analyst or to be training to be a data analyst, because those data analysis jobs are going to be taken by AI for sure. 100%.
Agreed.
Right.
And it feels really like negative and dystopian. And and Didi, we talk all the time, and I don't think either one of us want it to be dystopian. And that's why we're having these conversations, because we want to bring up the topic and we want people to think about it seriously and to really kind of take it seriously and to go, right, okay, well, what are we actually going to do about this? And, how do we prepare ourselves for what comes next? I think that's the question. Yeah. What can we do as individuals?
Use the tools.
And society. It's the whole, think global, act local. So you've got to think about what's the situation going to be, and then how can I have an impact on that with my family and friends and my individual network and myself. And I think that's where that's why we're having these conversations. Do you agree, Didi? Is that a good way to sum it up?
I do. Yeah. And I like what you just said, Zach. Use the tools. Like, what do we do? You got to use the tools. It's like,
don't be afraid to use the tools, rather.
Yeah. Because there's going to be an art to using those tools. And I think that the people that are going to survive are going to be the people that are going to interface with AI well.
Yeah. And who are going to learn. Those are going to be the survivors. Yeah. And the people who, I feel sorry for the people who have no idea and aren't interested in just literally this is going to blindside them and they have no idea what's coming.
Not us.
Well, they'll have some great video games to play.
They will. That's true. And
created by
watch.
AI, probably, even better video games than we've ever had. Well, on that note, it's been amazing talking to you. Thank you so much, Zach. And
yeah, likewise.
Zach, that was really cool. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And give our best to the Big Apple. Once a New Yorker, always a New Yorker.
Yeah, will do.
Exactly. Okay, folks, that's a wrap on another amazing episode of Creatives with AI. Thanks so much for joining us today. We really hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as we did. If you want to stay up to date on how all things related to AI is impacting the creative industries, then be sure to subscribe to the podcast on whatever your favorite platform is. We're on them all. And follow us on social media. We're on mainly Twitter and LinkedIn, but we're the same handle everywhere, which is @Creatives with AI. We'd also really appreciate it if you could just take a minute to leave a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Those are our two main platforms, and it really helps other listeners find the show, and it also helps us get more popularity and more exposure. So it'd be amazing if you could help us with that. If you've got any questions, topic suggestions, guest recommendations, feel free to send us an email. The best email is hello@creativeswith.ai, or you can shoot us a message on social media. Either one is fine. We love hearing from all of you, and we can't wait to bring more exciting episodes in the future. And the best way we can do that is to get feedback from the audience and have the audience tell us who it is you'd like to hear from and what things you'd like us to ask and what topics you'd like us to talk about. So please use that. Let us know what you want to hear, and we'll do our best to get it for you. And last but not least, we'd like to give a shout out to our sponsor, Featurehand Limited, who make this podcast possible. Your support means the world to us, and we really appreciate it. So thanks very much. That's it for today. So until next time, take care, everybody, and stay curious.